Hey, I'm Jeff Reber with ERA Heavener Realty, and one of the things that I observe happen fairly often in real estate transactions is confusing terms. And every industry has its own terminology, and confusing things can be problematic. This is why when I go to the doctor, to the hospital, I always have my phone ready to Google whatever term just came out of somebody's mouth that I don't understand. And actually, my wife is a former nurse. So either I'm Googling it or I'm asking her, hey, what does that mean? So today we're going to talk about the difference between an earnest money deposit and a down payment. Okay, let's start with the earnest money deposit. Sometimes referred to as good faith money or even a binder deposit. It sits as money set aside from the buyer to represent to the seller that they are serious about purchasing this home, that they have skin in the game. And from the state of Florida's perspective, as far as a real estate contract goes, you must have consideration in order for the contract to be complete. And so that's what this earnest money does. This is the consideration in the deal. Now, it doesn't mean that this money is gone from the buyer's control. It will be held by either a title company or attorney or a real estate brokerage involved in the transaction. But if the buyer exits the contract for a contractual reason, then the buyer would receive that money back. Two normal contingencies that would be a contractual reason would be both an inspection contingency and a financing contingency. The inspection contingency being if the buyer does their inspections, determines that the house doesn't fit for whatever reason, and they're backing out based on that contingency, they would get this earnest money deposit back. Same thing for financing. And that's not a one-size-fits-all answer because every contract is different, every deal is different, but generally that's how that works. And so the flip side of that being, if the buyer decides to not purchase the home, but does not have a contingency to come underneath for protection, then the seller gets to keep that money. So all of a sudden, buyer says, hey, I don't want to buy this house anymore. I want to buy this other house. And I've already lost my timeline on my inspection and financing contingencies. Here, Mr. and Miss Seller, you keep the earnest money. And believe it or not, that does happen. So if your earnest money deposit is skin in the game for the seller from the buyer, the down payment is skin in the game from the buyer to the lender. And so if there's no lender involved in the transaction, there is no quote unquote down payment. And the down payment is the difference between what you're buying the house for and what you are borrowing from a lender to purchase the house. So if you're buying a house for $1 million and you're borrowing $800,000, you would have a $200,000 down payment. And one of the confusing parts is that earnest money we just talked about that's sitting with either a real estate brokerage or a title company or attorney gets rolled into the down payment at closing. And so that's one of the slightly confusing parts of the term is that they're coordinated but not the same, right? And one of the other things is that this down payment amount can be different depending on the type of loan that you're getting. So, for example, a VA loan quite usually or normally is a 100% financing type of loan. Therefore, there is no down payment. So the earnest money deposit that a buyer puts with a title company up front can occasionally be refunded to that buyer if they're also getting closing cost assistance. An FHA loan is typically a 3.5% down payment, and then conventional loans, you'll see anything from some rare conventional loans are 100%, but typically 5 to 20% down or more depending on the situation. So that's what the down payment is, and that basically sits as the initial equity that you have in the house when you purchase. So that you've heard the term illiquid asset. You can't get that money out unless you either refinance to pull some of it out or you sell the property. So you can't exchange the bricks on the wall for cash to go buy something else. You've got to wait until you do one of those two things. So that's what a down payment is, and that's the difference between a down payment and an earnest money deposit. I hope that's helpful for your next conversation at dinner. If you've got any real estate questions, I would love to chat. Again, Jeff Reber over at ERA Heavener Realty. You can reach me 904-405-1995 for call or text, and then my email address is jeff@era.com. Hope you're doing well, and we'll catch up soon.